What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019, getting into the week here. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, opinions, jokes, whatever you want to share with us here today. So let's get into the news here. As you know, yesterday there was a major, shall we say, confrontation between Israel and Syria. And Israel came on out and uncharacteristically announced that, yes, they had attacked targets inside Syria, insisting that they were all Iranian targets. Well, it turns out that in point of fact, Israel hit Syrian military assets inside Iran. They're claiming that Syria fired at them, that Israel had warned them not to interfere with attacks on Iranian forces, and so there was definitely an exchange there. So Israel destroyed 8 Syrian air defense targets. They killed 11 troops. This is getting awfully close to being outright open war. And again, I applaud Presidents Assad and Putin for trying to keep this thing from escalating, but it looks like Israel is really pushing hard on this, and it may very well, because Netanyahu needs a distraction. He's facing imminent indictment. He's got upcoming elections, and his primary rival is already out there campaigning on a war platform about how they bombed Gaza back to the Stone Age. Rah, rah, rah. You know, killing Palestinians is good politics in Israel here. But apparently Israel airstrikes destroyed 8 Syrian air defense batteries, killed 11 troops in the system. But interestingly enough, the S-300s were not used, and I think I know why. But a lot of people are saying, you know, these attacks also included strikes into an area near Damascus, near the international airport. Now, Moscow has apparently sent a message to Tel Aviv that it is planning on renovating the Damascus International Airport, which has suffered a lot of damage over the many attacks. And Russia is telling Israel further attacks by Israel will not be welcomed, which is a very polite, gentle way of saying that Israel is standing at the edge of a red line. Meanwhile, of course, there was a massive onslaught, and Syria shot down more than 30 Israeli cruise missiles and guided bombs. And I think Israel carried out this massive attack to try and goad Syria into using the S-300 system. And had Syria fallen for it and used up these very expensive S-300 missiles on guided bombs and loitering munitions and cruise missiles, I suspect Israel would have followed up with a major attack. I think that's the reason for what was going on there. Israel, of course, on their Twitter channel, put out a video showing how they destroyed a Syrian Panzer S air defense system that was firing on them. But it turns out the clip was edited, and Israel took video from 2 separate videos. The one showing the actual strike on the Panzer air defense system shows that it was inactive at the time. The system was not firing. The radar was disabled. There was a loading vehicle next to it, and it looks like the IDF basically hit a system. It spent all of its ammunition, was waiting for reloading, which from the tactical point of view is the best time to hit it. But then to sell the idea that Israel was only firing on units that fired on them, clearly that was not true. Now, Israeli policy for attacking targets in Syria seems to have changed, and it is intensifying. This is coming from Intelligence Minister Israel Katz in an interview with Army Radio. And it does look like it's escalating. And this Minister Katz said that Israel is in open confrontation with Iran in Syria, and they want all of the Iranian troops out. So does Mike Pompeo. Says, we're going to drive all the Iranian boots out. Iran maintains that all they've sent are military advisors and, of course, material support, which is what Israel keeps attacking and blowing up. But at the rate Israel is going right now, they could be facing a three-front war this year. This is coming from the Institute for National Security Studies, saying that the situation is so volatile, it could lead Israel to have a war against Iran, a war against Hezbollah, and the Palestinians all at the same time. Now, Israel certainly has the weaponry to do that, but it would be a bit of a stress with at least two of the three opponents so close to home, as it were. Turning over to Syria, as you know, there was that Manbij bombing, supposedly terror bombing, that was just too cutely timed to Trump's announcement of a Syrian troop withdrawal. And of course, you've got a split on both sides, with the war hawks saying, well, see, this proves ISIS isn't defeated. We have to stay until the bitter end here. And on the other camp, you have everybody else saying that this bombing should not derail the Syria withdrawal, that these Americans who were killed in Syria show the cost in blood of delaying the withdrawal. So they're still arguing back and forth about that. But again, going on back, why would ISIS want to do anything to prevent the U.S. from withdrawing? That's why this whole bombing thing never really made any sense. ISIS wants the U.S. gone. They want them out of there. ISIS didn't have a motive to carry out that bombing. Okay, over on the Kurdish border, apparently a U.S. Kurdish patrol was attacked inside Syria. Erdogan is offering to step on in. Basically, there's a growing security vacuum in Syria, supposedly predicated upon Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops, which now appears Trump is backing down on that. But apparently this bomber targeted a joint patrol by U.S. forces and the Kurdish-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces, which is backed by the United States, and carried out the attack here. Now, apparently, Turkish President Erdogan phoned Donald Trump and urged him to let Turkey control Kurdish Syria. Now, there's a very tricky move. Basically, Erdogan is trying to act like he's the hero running to the rescue of the poor retreating Americans here. But we already know from Afrin that Turkey has territorial ambitions inside Syria. And this would be a major step forward for them to seize military control of Kurdish Syria. And then once entrenched, it would be very, very difficult for them to get on out. Erdogan was also saying that they're not going to allow the so-called Syria safe zone to turn into a swamp. And they're basically comparing this newly created safe zone in Syria to be the one, just like the one in northern Iraq, where U.S.-backed Kurdish militants launch attacks on Turkish soil. Now, here's a very, very interesting story. Apparently, the U.S. is threatening to sanction Lebanon if they participate in rebuilding Syria. And why would the U.S. want to do that? Well, because there's money to be made in rebuilding Syria. There's money to be made loaning Syria, money to rebuild, and then sending in American contractors and corporations to do the rebuilding. That's part of the payoff of a war. Certainly was in the case of Iraq. And that may be the reason why there are so many people in Washington, D.C. don't want the United States to leave Syria. We would be losing that final payoff. We've lost a huge amount of money in Syria but we could cut our losses by basically taking control of the rebuilding of Syria, because that's the way it works. Spend a bunch of money blowing up a country, then go into the country and say, we're going to loan you the money to rebuild, and you've got to use our people to do it. So that is why the U.S. may be threatening to sanction Lebanon. They don't want anybody else in there but the U.S. And this will bring us into conflict with Russia, which has already indicated they're planning on taking part of the rebuilding of Syria. So it's all about the money, all about the money. And if you look at Iraq's reconstruction, huge amounts of money went on in there. And the quality of the reconstruction was horrible. It was just all about making the money. I remember this one story about how the U.S. was building a new police station for the Iraqi police. It wasn't even finished before it began to fall apart and couldn't be used. Now, up in Afghanistan, things are still not going well. The U.S. war in Afghanistan is continuing to fail. Remember, empire, a graveyard of empires here. And according to this article coming out of Alabama, the main problems are disunity of command and lack of political foresight. And they're basically predicting the U.S. will lose Afghanistan, and so am I. Now, disunity of U.S. command, that, of course, is a problem with the Pentagon. Which, like the government as a whole, has become badly factionalized. Everybody's looking out for their own interests. There is no strong chain of command over there. Lack of political foresight, that gets right to the administration and the State Department. And lack of political foresight has been a curse on this government for year after year after year after year. They keep going with what sounds great in a corporate media news broadcast, and they don't think it all the way through, and that's why they keep getting into these messes. Not too long ago, there was a bit of a stink where security personnel in Gaza intercepted a group of Israeli agents trying to pretend to be Hamas driving into Gaza. And they were arrested, and the Palestinians rolled up a major Israeli spy operation inside Gaza. Now it's come on out what they were up to. Apparently they were in there planting spying devices on Hamas communications network. And they botched it. It's a botched operation here. Meanwhile, over in Jerusalem, once again, Israeli settlers and Israeli forces have stormed into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This happened just yesterday. And this time, they not only photographed the mosque's landmarks, they were taking measurements. And they didn't explain why they were doing that. It's got a lot of people scratching their head, what the heck is going on? But apparently Israeli settlers storm the holy site on a daily basis in an attempt to divide the mosque temporally and spatially. They just want it to go away. I mean, so much blood has been spilled over this one hill. Everybody says, oh, it's our holy site. Oh, it's our holy site. Well, anyway. As I mentioned before, Benny Gantz, he's the former Israeli army chief. He is now campaigning to be Israel's next prime minister. Is going up against Benjamin Netanyahu in the elections that are scheduled for April. His campaign videos are out there, and it shows videos of the death and destruction all over Gaza, and that's what he's campaigning on. That he bombed Gaza back to the Stone Age. Screen announces 6,231 targets destroyed and 1,364 terrorists killed. Now, to the Israeli mindset, everybody who's a Palestinian is by default a terrorist, including the little tiny kids who get hit by those bullets over there on the right of return march here. Now, the United States and Poland have organized what they're describing as an international conference on the Middle East. And apparently the agenda for this conference is dealing with Iran's nuclear ambitions. Not too surprisingly, Iran was not invited. And Russia basically said this was just for political gain and propaganda purposes, so they are not sending anybody else either. Now, there's been a new development in the Sergei Skripal case. And for those of you who don't remember it, that was the case where this former double agent who worked for Russia and Great Britain and his daughter were found unconscious on a bench. And immediately there was this claim that Russia had tried to assassinate them on British sovereign territory. And the story was very suspicious. When it first came on out, the story was they got sick while eating at a restaurant and that other people at the restaurant had gotten ill as well. And the restaurant in question serves seafood, especially shellfish, which if you are not careful, shellfish can lead to serious food poisoning. Setting that aside, the new story is that the very first medical attention that the Skripals received was from a British military colonel, Chief Nursing Officer Alison McCord, and her 16-year-old daughter, Abigail. And Russia is saying this just seems to be a little too much of a coincidence. But here's the interesting thing about the story. According to this article, which came out in Sputnik News, the teenager, Abigail, saw Sergei Skripal collapse on a bench, and she applied her first aid skills that she had learned at school, apparently then backed up by her mother. Now, we've all been told that Novichok is the most toxic nerve agent in the world, although both Sergei and Yulia survived. Apparently, the problem of secondary contamination is very high. So why didn't this little girl get sick after she supposedly touched the Skripals? If she'd come into contact with any part of their body that had been in contact with Novichok, she would have been in serious, serious trouble. Now, Russia is saying that the reason Great Britain is trying to fan up the Skripal case again is to try and divert attention away from the chaos taking place over in Parliament over the Brexit decision. And that would actually make a great deal of sense. And Maduro is still in control. And Mike Pence is now out there in public urging the people of Venezuela to rise up against the dictator Maduro. And of course, they're out there basically saying, well, we know Maduro's re-election had to be flawed. You know, we've got all these countries. We refuse to recognize the election. It's really none of your business. It's up to the people of Venezuela here. But apparently there is a major problem within the government here. The National Assembly, of course, is led by Maduro's opposition. They literally tried to declare Maduro illegitimate. Maduro went to Venezuela's Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declared the leadership of the opposition-controlled National Assembly as illegitimate, and all of its decisions void for trying to repudiate the presidency of Maduro. This is going to end in a civil war, and of course, you just know the United States government is in this up to their necks. They've been trying to get Venezuela into the empire, going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And if you would like to support Republic Broadcasting, and trust me, we need it. Nobody's getting rich here in the independent media. Anybody who is getting rich in the independent media means they sold out to somebody somewhere. So we rely on your support to keep us going, to keep replacing the badly needed equipment, to keep paying, you know, the server fees and the connection fees and all the stuff that goes into running an online broadcast outfit here. So if you can help, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call in with a credit or debit donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other time. The network thanks you. Okay, let's turn to the domestic politics. Now, here's an interesting little story, and this is coming from aimfortruth.org, claiming that somebody on the inside of Robert Mueller's investigation has leaked a copy of the forthcoming final report. And there's nothing there. I mean, the 26 indicted Russian names have been sent to the Department of Justice National Security Division for follow-up. They're not going to come on over. I mean, they sent lawyers, but they're not going to come over here. Concord Catering and Yevgeny Prigozhin are still fighting the special counsel investigation. They seem to be winning. Papadopoulos spent a few nights in jail. Paul Manafort, of course, is in serious trouble. Flynn was harassed and threatened. He may spend a few days in jail due to being entrapped and accused of lying. But that's it. The original scope of the investigation, they found nothing. Absolutely nothing. More than $30 million for the special counsel investigation. All they really found was Manafort's tax evasion. That was it. So let's look at some specifics. Apparently, 2 prostitutes paid by David Brock's Media Matters lying about Trump, and another prostitute busted out of a jail in Thailand and then arrested by Russia. No evidence was ever presented. And the one in Thailand has already gone public saying, yeah, she just made it up to get out of that jail in Thailand here. Now, Michael Cohen's lies about prostitutes, which got a guilty plea for campaign election irregularities, there was no evidence for that either. And by the way, that's not a crime. Fake letter about lifting sanctions on Russia given by Cohen to Trump. The letter was not delivered to Trump. And apparently, Felix Sater, Comey's FBI asset, wrote the letter with Comey's help. They fabricated evidence there. An alleged Russian internet troll factory that had closed down 2 years before the 2016 election. They indicted some imaginary names. They don't even know who was there. Mueller is out there trying to blame the DNC hacking on just about everybody. It's a shotgun approach. Julian Assange, Russia, Guccifer 2.0, Romanian hackers, Kim.com, Alexander Gubarev, among others. No Russian hacker was ever found. And don't forget, the metadata on those files show it was not taken out over the internet. Somebody on the inside copied it to a flash drive and walked it out the door. Most likely Seth Rich here. So that's it. If this leak is accurate, Mueller found nothing, and that may explain why the corporate media is out there still trying to sell Russiagate, 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 Russiagate. They're hoping people will believe the lie even when the truth comes on out, because that's an advantage the corporate media has. People will get the first bit of news about a subject. Oh, my goodness, those terrible children at Covington. And even when the truth comes on out, they won't reverse. They don't want to admit that they were wrong, which is a terrible weakness in the human condition. Okay, Jerome Corsi has come up with a very interesting explanation for why it is that Robert Mueller's office issued that statement last Friday denying the BuzzFeed report that Michael Cohen had testified that Donald Trump ordered him to lie to Congress. Corsi is basically saying that Mueller's office was trying to basically spread that as fake news. And then BuzzFeed picked it up and turned it into a major, major issue. And Mueller backtracked basically to save his own rear end and cover up the fact that his office was the source. Now, Corsi has amended his lawsuit against Mueller. He's expanded it to include Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post, and is now asking for over $1 billion. And I hope he gets it here. All righty, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking about BuzzFeed. And as you know, BuzzFeed was seriously embarrassed going with that story that claimed Trump had ordered Michael Cohen to lie to Congress. And it's not their first embarrassment. And I think we need to start realizing BuzzFeed is not really about reporting the facts. They're about pushing agendas. And apparently, a while back, founder and CEO Jonah Peretti created a fake website and email address in the name of a prominent gun rights advocate, John Lott, in order to spread disinformation. So BuzzFeed is in the business of lying to you, and they're paid quite handsomely to do that. All right, let's go to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike Pence, he sounds like, the Venezuelan people need to overthrow Maduro and bring democracy. It's the same. The left is saying we need to get rid of Hitler, Trump, and overthrow that, that dictator.
That's exactly
Trump.
right. I mean, Pence is actually justifying, the overthrow of the government. Of course, that's what they're trying to do here in this country, is get rid of Trump.
Yeah, I mean, people might not like Maduro, but who the hell are we to say, or what business is of ours? Who are we to say it was legitimate or not legitimate? Ask Bernie Sanders what was legitimate and not legitimate. I mean, come on, man. This whole thing's a joke. And I think Mike Pence might have tipped the Venezuelans off because he mentioned that the opposition guy's name, and didn't they bust there to try to steal a bunch of weapons and they got caught?
Yeah.
Maybe they knew. Yes, so maybe actually help the Venezuelan government out by letting them know something. We're going to try to pull this, and we're going, and then they acted because they know who the opposition party is over there. I mean,
yes.
I bet you it's pro EU.
Well, I'm sure it's,
America,
it's already been co-opted, by CIA, which is, in the business of overthrowing foreign governments.
Yeah, but like I said, what business? I mean, my God, we got rotting infrastructure still. Nothing's getting done. They find time to mention Maduro being a dictator. How come they're not finding time to find any money to fix our rotting infrastructure? Mike Pence is not a good person. I don't care if some people think he's just part of the machine. Goes along with the talking points, or and the same with Bolton and Pompeo. I mean, I don't even know if Trump is on our side anymore. I mean, do you?
I think Trump is proving himself to be very weak and easy to control here. And the harsh reality is the United States is in a wartime economy, which is basically all available wealth goes to the war machine, and everything else is put on hold. Repairing the roads, repairing the dams, repairing the bridges, improving education, all of that stuff. They say we'll deal with that after victory, and then of course if you don't win the war, things get really bad. And what it's going to come on down to is the government is going to try and find ways to get more and more money out of the American people in order to keep trying to expand its empire across the globe. And they're not really having a lot of luck doing it, and it's turning out to cost a lot more than people were expecting. I mean, we're still stuck in Afghanistan. They're trying to stay stuck in Syria, and it's not going very well.
Are we the longest empire ever to be stuck in Afghanistan at this point? I mean, I think we are. I mean, I don't know, how long were the British there? Weren't they there twice?
I don't know the history of Britain in Afghanistan. I know that the last military leader who succeeded in conquering all of it was Alexander the Great, and he only held on to it for 3 years.
And Mike, if I still got time, I want to move over to Christopher Steele with the dirty dust.
Yes.
I still want to remind everybody, Christopher Steele is linked to Skripal. They all worked at this ex-spy firm in Britain. So there's that tie there that the Skripal thing was just a setup. Just like the MAGA hat kid with the college kid, he was set up. This whole thing, it's the same playbook, like to blame Russia, to blame Trump, and it's amazing though, Mike. They have the amount of people to pull all these stunts off. I mean, it blows my mind what a web. It's definitely a deep state web that spans the world, not just this country. Because if you look with Skripal and Christopher Steele, well, Christopher Steele handed over that dirty fake dossier to what? Didn't he hand it over to John McCain? And
Yes.
John McCain handed it over to the media? See?
No, John McCain handed it to the FBI, and I forget who leaked it to the media.
But it's like, I mean, it's just a shame how, you can find people, and, the Skripals will probably never turn up, Mike. They're probably either dead or on some island somewhere, in the British area. But,
Well,
that's all I got to say, Mike.
All right, thank you for the call.
Good show.
That's a major diplomatic faux pas for Great Britain because Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia are still Russian citizens, and Russian diplomats are demanding that Britain allow them to visit the Skripals, and Britain is refusing, and that violates all kinds of treaties and conventions and so forth. So something is going on there. Outside of that one obviously very choreographed video interview with Yulia, they're being held incommunicado if they have not been gotten rid of. So anyway, let's go back to the phones. Joe in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, the last caller was saying, they use the same playbook and they just keep getting away with it. And the reason they get away with it is because of our media. All these false flags, they all should have been blown by the media back to the JFK assassination. But what I think and what I think Trump really needs to do is he needs to show, he needs to open up the books on the CIA and who in the media is on their payroll. I mean, they're his enemy. The CIA is the enemy of the president. Everybody knows it. They were funding I'm sure the whole BuzzFeed stuff and the independent counsel. He needs to blow their cover. I'd love to see which one of these guys, these talking heads, and how many of them, that guy with NBC and half of these people are Operation Mockingbird media CIA.
Yeah.
And that's why they get away with this. I mean, we're talking about this information because we get our sources. We are independent thinkers. But the average American isn't. The average American turns on the TV to get spoon-fed news by CIA, Mockingbird, mainstream, deep state corporate media. And that is the main problem. And I'm very disappointed in Trump in that from the beginning, he didn't go after, not just going after the deep state media, but sponsoring and nurturing the alt-right media. He went to Fox and Hannity, who they don't want to help out the little guy in the alt media. They want to keep it corporate and Fox-dominated monopoly. So it's very sad. And I heard just that Sarah Sanders isn't really having many press conferences anymore, and that's I mean, in a way I understand it, but it's a failure on his part for not allowing more right and alt-right media people into those press conferences that would have asked fair questions, that would have asked even pro questions for her, and maybe even questions more about Hillary. But you never got that at a press conference because they let the same stiff in there from the deep state media corporate complex.
Yeah, and there was also the issue that as the independent media has come under attack with all of this social media deplatforming and the rest of it, Trump scarcely made much noise about it. And Trump has to know that the independent media did play a major role in getting him into that Oval Office. By countering all of this horrible propaganda that was being poured all over him by the DNC and by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And now a lot of us are feeling he's turned his back on us, and if he's expecting us to go to bat for him again in 2020, he's going to be sorely disappointed.
Well, I think, he probably feels like, well, where else are they going to go? And that's a big mistake. He really had an opportunity to like I said, to nurture the independent media, to bring it up, to bring it, invite it in, But I think, probably one of our biggest enemy are the corporate right media like Fox and Hannity and Limbaugh. They really don't take their time to pick up little guys and interview us or give you any like love or give you any publicity. And that's what you really need to do if you really want to see change in this country. I mean, you don't really. I've noticed that about the right, because I've been listening to all different people through my life, and I really don't see us helping each other out. There's always bickering and fighting. I listened to Alex Jones. Alex Jones could have really helped people and brought them out into the limelight, but he's very controlling. A lot of these guys, right and alt-right, they want to control their little piece of the pie. They don't really want to broaden it. And when they got a foot in the door with Trump, they should be helping other people get into that room and becoming, the new industries and new people, celebrities, so we could have some people that are on TV and, sitting at the table. It's a shame.
Well, it really is. And there was a time when some of the independent media people were getting on TV, but those days are gone. We're absolutely, blacklisted. They don't want to hear anything that we have to say. In fact, the New York Times came out with an editorial opinion attacking online critics of vaccine safety. And just say, the public health will prevail. No, the corporate profits will prevail. Anything else, Joe?
Well, yeah, I just, one more thing about this story. I remember when Bill Kristol, at one time he was like Dan Quayle's aide, and next thing you know, all of a sudden he's on ABC. He's a talking head out of nowhere. They just take these neocons and they give them this great platform. And you don't see that happening to us. And if anything, we're constantly the white, Christian, heterosexual males, or we're slowly being thrown out of the. You can't watch the news programs anymore and see very many white people. CNN, it's all black people. I mean, you'd think this country was 80% black watching CNN now, and it's either black or woman. If it's a white guy, he's a homosexual, and it's really a shame because part of what the Democrats have done is they've demanded a seat on the table for black people, knowing that 90% of black people are left. So when you hear about affirmative action, it's really not about helping races. It's about helping the left.
Yes.
So by putting blacks in and putting gays in and putting even women in, it's always like they're always left women. They're always left black. They're always left, gays. So it's really it's an insidious thing because they're not really they don't give a damn about the blacks. They don't give it because look what's happened to them. They haven't improved their life. All they give a damn about is power, and that's their power play. They cloak themselves behind affirmative action, but it's really political action, and it works for them, and it's a disgrace. I'm sorry, I got passionate about this.
Well, that's okay. Nothing great is accomplished without passion. And thank you, Joe. We're going to let you go here and switch to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, the Democrat Party, the party that just keeps on giving. Somebody played for me earlier today a clip of Miss Joy Behar from The View earlier today, and I was just blown away, I mean, you got Whoopi. Who names their child Whoopi? I mean, come on. Whoopi Goldberg. She comes right out and she asks plainly, admitting, that the media is continuously falsely reporting stories, and asks the question, why is it? Why do we keep making the same mistake? And here comes Joy Behar just can't help herself because we're so desperate to get Trump out of office. It's like they're admitting they're so desperate.
Yes.
They'll latch on to anything, whether it's real or not. And this ought to be the defining moment for the left-wing liberal media.
Well, they're trying the spaghetti approach. They're just throwing handfuls of pasta at the wall and hoping something will stick. And so far, nothing has.
Something's sticking, Mike, but it ain't pasta.
Gotcha. I understand. Anything else, Art?
Have a good one, man.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Pardon me. Now, Steve Bannon is out there making a prediction, apparently got interviewed in the Daily Mail, saying that Trump will have an opportunity to appoint 2 justices to the Supreme Court. Now, obviously, the speculation that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg may be forced into retirement due to the unfortunate compounding health concerns. She's still not on the bench. She's working from home. The current Supreme Court session will end, I think, tomorrow. And then they have about a month off, which is going to be some nice recuperative time for her. We'll see what happens when the Supreme Court reconvenes. But according to the Daily Mail, Steve Bannon is expressing his theory that Justice Clarence Thomas is going to retire. And Thomas is the longest tenured justice currently presiding, and only the second African American to serve on the highest court. Now, he's a strict constitutionalist, and do you remember his confirmation? Oh man, the pubic hair on the Coke can or something like that. That was before they started calling it the Kavanaugh treatment. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Tom in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. It's good to hear you. I heard on the radio today that somebody chimed in and said that Trump, when he canceled Pelosi's airplane trip, he should have waited till after she was already out of the country and then canceled it. I thought that was pretty funny. The other thing, I've been watching Jeopardy this week, and there's a guy that's been smoking everybody on Jeopardy, and I just wondered how you would do on Jeopardy, man. You have all the answers for almost everything. I'd like to see you get on that show and rack your brains with these people.
Well, I'm not a big fan of TV game shows, even though I did briefly work for Goodson Todman Productions. I don't know. The kind of questions Jeopardy asks are not the ones that I think about a lot here. I think it's a completely different context. And right now, of course, it would be very, very difficult for me to get to their studio anyway, because they're, I think, in Los Angeles, and I'm here in Hawaii.
Well, you have my admiration.
Well, thank
Aloha.
you, sir. Thank you very much, and aloha. And we're going to let you go. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Interesting little bit of a development. We're finally starting to see some GOP spine. And even though they've lost control of the House of Representatives, they do still have control of the Senate. And Devin Nunes, apparently on Fox News, admitted that Hillary Clinton's team, working with Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS, probably set up the entire Trump Tower meeting as a way of entrapping the campaign. Now, politics is a dirty business, and we don't need any ghosts come from the grave to tell us that. But it is very, very muddy here. Now, Lindsey Graham is the newly appointed chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he is already out there saying it's time to dig into the Clinton and Obama scandals. And, of course, the Democrats are out there saying, oh, politics, politics, politics. You can't go there. That's the third rail. The dragons will come and eat you if you dare do that. But Lindsey Graham is saying that he wants to investigate the FBI's handling of its investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant applications, and he wants an investigation into the Democrats' conduct during Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. Pardon me. And he told Fox News last month that he believed the FBI basically phoned in the Clinton probe, noting that there is, quote, a certain unevenness here about how you investigate campaigns, which he's trying to be diplomatic, but he's basically saying what we've already observed. Justice and the FBI, after Trump, after the Republicans, after the Republicans. Oh, what about Uranium One? Nothing there. What about mishandling classified documents? Oh, she didn't mean to do wrong. The bias has been very, very obvious for a long time, and I wish Lindsey Graham luck in bringing that out to the awareness of the American people. Now, interestingly enough, last October, former FBI General Counsel James Baker testified to Congress and basically said he believed that Hillary Clinton should have been charged for her alarming, appalling mishandling of classified information. And apparently Baker told Congress he got into arguments with other members of the FBI, including James Comey, about the investigation. And he said, my original belief, after having conducted the investigation and towards the end of it, then sitting down and reading a binder of her materials, I thought that it was alarming, appalling, whatever words I said, and argued with others about why they thought she shouldn't be charged. Now remember, James Comey actually went on TV in that infamous press conference, and he went down the laundry list of Title 18 felony violations committed by Hillary Clinton, and then he said she didn't mean to do wrong, therefore we're not recommending prosecution. Loretta Lynch said we accept the FBI's recommendation, Hillary's off the hook. But Title 18 does not require intent. What you mean is irrelevant. Okay, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're now in day 32 of the partial government shutdown. Everybody's pointing fingers back and forth. They're trying to say this is Trump's shutdown. This is the House of Representatives shutdown. And again, it's an impasse. And Trump wants that border wall. We need that border wall for reasons I'll make clear a little bit later in the show. But I think public opinion is swinging away from Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Over at townhall.com, they've got an article out there saying that the Democrats' arrogant intransigence could bite them if this shutdown drags on. And they're saying this could hurt the Democrats. Both sides are not budging. They're not giving 1%. Well, that's not true. Trump has come up with a couple of compromises. The Democrats are standing there firm and saying, no, we want total capitulation and surrender is what we want here. Now, Mike Adams over on InfoWars came out with an idea, and it's going to sound like it's a little bit out there, but knowing what we know about this government, we can't dismiss it. And basically, Mike Adams is saying that there may be some kind of a false flag involving an aircraft or an airport. And he's saying they could easily blow up an airplane or airport and blame it on Trump's shutdown while simultaneously pushing the narrative that the TSA actually protects America, which has never actually been done. But they're getting desperate. They are definitely getting desperate, and desperate people take desperate chances, even when they're on vacation in Hawaii here. So let's talk about the Covington Catholic students. That situation is continuing to be all over the independent media. The corporate media, for the most part, is trying to act like it never happened anyway. Some corporate media is saying, yeah, we messed up on this one here. But there's a story out of Reason.com about how the media wildly mischaracterized that video of the Covington Catholic students confronting the Native American veteran. And it was a very carefully edited clip out of nearly 2 hours of footage. And by the way, we have a link to the entire 2 hours. You can look at it yourself and see what's going on. And these Catholic students, mostly white, wearing MAGA hats, remained very calm and restrained despite being subjected to incessant racist, homophobic, and bigoted verbal abuse by members of this bizarre religious sect, Black Hebrew Israelites, who were lurking nearby. And after that had gone on for a while, then the Native Americans just wandered right on and started banging their drums right in front of the kid's face. Now, over at The Atlantic, writer Julie Irwin Zimmerman is one of the few journalists to basically come forward and say, yeah, we messed up. We jumped the guns. And she says in this article that, yeah, she hates the MAGA hats, and she let her prejudices control what she was seeing. And she's realizing now that, yeah, this wasn't what it seemed to be. And it's triggered this wave of abuse on Twitter, threats against the family, threats against the school here. Over at USA Today, they had a story about how the Covington Catholic High School has closed temporarily due to the threats. They're concerned about the safety of their students, including the students who weren't even there at the rally. But USA Today fails to mention that a full examination of the video shows that the Covington students were not to blame for the confrontation. They're trying to save face. We've reported the story, and even if we're wrong, we're sticking by it. And that's not just confined to the corporate media. Apparently, Catholic leaders across the country immediately condemned the Covington Catholic High School students accused of confronting and mocking a Native American elder, even though a full examination of the video proves they were innocent. And this went everywhere in the church. Bishops, priests, nuns, even the student school condemned the actions as bigoted after that carefully edited short clip circulated Friday on Twitter. And now that, of course, that whole story has been discredited, silence. They've made their statement, and that's going to be it. People are still commenting about Twitter's double standards because Twitter has spent years assuring the public it will crack down on trolling, harassment, and violent threats. But it hasn't done so in the case of calls for violence against the high schools, the Covington Catholic High School kids in Kentucky. Over the past 48 hours, there's been literally a mob of Twitter users, many of them with that blue check marks next to their name. That's the new icon. And they've flooded the platform with disgusting abuse, violent threats, and calls to harass innocent students of the high school. And Twitter just leaves it up there. Twitter just leaves it up there because it serves the agenda. We're pushing the story that white people are bad, they're racist. Over at Saturday Night Live, Sarah Beatty, who is a contributing writer for Saturday Night Live, she went out on Twitter offering her followers oral sex if they physically assaulted one of the kids from Covington Catholic High School. And, of course, she didn't use the word oral sex. She used something else here. And I have to wonder how Sarah's parents felt when they saw that. I also have to wonder if that's how she got onto Saturday Night Live in the first place. Okay, so let's talk about this guy, Nathan Phillips. This is the Native American elder harassed by the MAGA kids. And apparently he has got a long history of appearing in the press claiming to be a victim of anti-Native racism. And he's raising money with the help of a major big money left-wing operation. And as it turns on out, the Washington Post once again has had to wipe the egg off their face because the Washington Post, along with a lot of other outlets, reported that Nathan Phillips served in the Vietnam War. No, he didn't. He was in the Marines for 4 years, but he didn't deploy to Vietnam. But he's been using this lie to help raise money for a documentary about his life. Oh, we're going to have a documentary about my life. How wonderful. Now, apparently, over at Aiea Entertainment, they have fired one of their journalists, Eric Abriss. He's a contributor to the New York media's pop culture site Vulture. And apparently he is one of the people who went onto Twitter with just these horrible tweets against these kids from the Covington Catholic High School. And I'm not in favor of punishing people at their job for what they do in their private time. But apparently this company felt that their reputation would not survive having this guy on their staff. But even though that whole tape has been exposed as carefully edited to reverse the narrative, they're still trying to push the story. Oh, those white people, they harassed that Native American, that poor Native American who served in Vietnam. Now, the video shows it was the white kids who were being harassed themselves. Now, President Trump has begun tweeting about the Covington Catholic hoax and basically saying this demonstrates how bad, how evil fake news can be, because all of these students of Covington have become symbols of fake news. And they're catching the attention of the world, and they'll use it for the good. Meanwhile, over at Twitter, the blue checkmark leftists have started quietly deleting their violent tweets aimed at the Covington students. And Trump is right. This is attracting the attention of the world. A Polish lawmaker has issued an invitation to the students from Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky to address the Polish parliament after being falsely accused of mocking Native Americans. And, pardon me, Dominic Tarksy, there's a question mark, there's an unprintable character, conservative member of the Polish parliament, newly elected vice president of the European Conservatives in the Council of Europe, basically came on out and said, you are very welcome to come and speak out as to what you believe in. So yes, this has caught the eye of the world. And I think together with BuzzFeed's embarrassment and so many other recent embarrassments, I think people's dependence of and trust on the corporate media, the decline is going to accelerate. It's already been in decline. It's already been in decline. This is going to accelerate it. We seem to be caught in an era where we no longer have truth and lies. We have lies and acceptable lies. We have the acceptable lies like Saddam had nuclear weapons. And the corporate media says, well, that's an acceptable lie, therefore we can publish it. The Covington kids harassed that Native American elder. That's the acceptable lie, we can publish that. And the lies just keep piling up and piling up. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Philip in Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yeah, what's the common denominator in all of this animosity and friction here that's going on, and not only here in this country but around the world? It's the media. And turns out that, as you would say, turns out that President Trump's assessment of the media is playing out, even though they misreported it. Remember how he came out and said the fake news is the enemy of the people, and they piled on and said they generalized it and said that the media is the enemy of the people, and they just demonized him relentlessly after that, and that's not what he said. But anyway, it's turning out that even the fake news reported is coming to pass. The media is lying to us on a daily basis, and if someone is continuously lying to you and misleading you and tricking you, is that a friend or is that someone who's your enemy, people?
That's definitely your enemy here. I mean, looking at the corporate media, going through newspaper, trying to find anything that's true takes a scanning electron microscope these days. But again, that's what corporate media is paid to do. They're paid to sell you things, sell you policies, sell you agendas, sell you the idea that all white people are bad guys, to sell you that, Saddam had nuclear weapons and so forth and so on. That's their job. Their job is not to report on the facts to you. That's supposed to be their job. the press is supposed to act as a watchdog on government abuse, but they've been pretty much taken over and suborned completely at this point. But again, the viewership numbers are showing that Americans are turning them off, and Americans are turning to the independent media, which is why Google and Facebook and YouTube are trying to find some way that they can silence us and shut us down. They're afraid. They're afraid they're losing their grip on the minds of America, and they are, and they have been for quite some time.
Yes, and it just reminds me of when Mika Brzezinski inadvertently spilled the beans on the media these days. Anyways, like you said, they were supposed to be the watchdogs, but they're not. You know, they're just dumb dogs that can't bark. But she said that essentially that it's the media's job to control what people think.
Yes.
Yeah, but I was listening to Rush today real quick here, and he had a caller on his program, and he provided a quote by the late Eric Severide. You remember him?
Oh, I remember him. I actually met him once at the Jet Propulsion Lab.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, are you aware of this quote by him about the media? He said that the biggest big business in America is not steel, automobiles, or television. It is the manufacture, refinement, and distribution of anxiety.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we're seeing being played out with this latest fake news narrative about the Covington School and this fake veteran. You know, what do they call these veterans? Honor stealing or something like that when they claim to be a veteran and they're not. They wear these.
Well, no, wait a minute. Okay, this guy is a veteran. He did serve in the Marine Corps. The part that he lied about was serving in Vietnam. So we got to get that clear.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, two more real quick quotes by the late Malcolm Little. You remember Malcolm Little, otherwise more widespread known as Malcolm X.
Yes.
You know what he had to say about the media? I am shocked by these quotes that I've never heard. I came across them recently. But anyway, he said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing.
I remember that one.
And do you? I just recently heard about it a couple weeks ago. And another one about the media, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses. And that ties right in with Mika Brzezinski's quote about the job and the role of the media in our world today is to control what you think. So, people, you better start thinking for yourselves.
Yep, you really do need to remember that. I remember there was a former president of CBS News who came on out and said, you know, our job is not to give people what they want, but what we think they should have.
Yep, they're not reporting the news, they're creating the news.
Okay,
right.
Well, Philip, thank you very much for that, and we're going to let you go here. And referencing back to an earlier caller who was out there saying, what kind of parents would name their child Whoopi? That's not her birth name. Her real name is Karen Elaine Johnson. And she took the stage name Whoopi Goldberg when she decided she wanted to work in Hollywood. Little bit of a butt kiss there to a certain ethnic group. Getting back to our politics here, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is already out there, trying to attract attention and build her image and build her reputation. And basically said that the Jewish community needs to be protected against its concerns about anti-Semitism coming from the White House. Now, that is really out there. We've never had a more pro-Israel president than Donald Trump. But Alexandria is out there saying that, oh, yes, we have anti-Semites in the White House. Absolutely do. apparently, this is a story with this. Actually, it's a YouTube video. Jacob Wohl says that he and the rest of his colleagues within an Israeli lobbying group are doing everything in their power to shut Tulsi Gabbard down before her campaign gets started. Now, I don't know about you. This sounds to me like foreign interference in our internal politics. So, Donald, get out that rubber stamp that says sanction and start using it. Because if it's bad for one country to interfere with our internal politics, it's bad for all of them to do that. But with her serious anti-war stance, there are going to be a lot of forces arrayed against Tulsi Gabbard. And I'd like to see her do well, but based on political history, it's going to be an uphill fight. Her own party is not going to want to support her at this point. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Very interesting. I'm looking on Fox News right now, and they're running a story basically that the contenders for the Democratic nomination in 2020 seem to be running on the idea of apologizing for past policy decisions. And apparently Joe Biden came out and said he was sorry for his tough on crime policies back there. So already, still this far away from the election, and the Democrats are saying, we don't believe in that stuff anymore. We're going to have new things that are going to make the country good for the American people here. Okay. Somebody just sent me one of James Wood's tweets. No, I'm not going to go with that. I agree with James Woods on a lot of stuff. That one I don't. All right, getting back to, we have a caller on the line. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mark, are you there?
You hear me?
I hear you now. I hear you now.
Okay. Oh, who was this that said this about Tulsi Gabbard before? You mentioned somebody.
Who mentioned what about Tulsi Gabbard?
Who said they got to do everything they can to defeat her?
Let me back up the file here. This was Jacob Wohl, and apparently he's part of this Israeli lobbying group, and the article did not include the name of the group. But he basically saying they're doing everything in their power to shut Tulsi down before her campaign gets started.
Dollars to donuts. He's got probably dollars to donuts. He's probably got dual citizenship on top of everything else. This guy. Well, we got to do everything. I'll tell you the truth. I'm getting ready to do everything I can to see that this lady is elected, even though there are certain things I don't agree with her on.
Yes.
I'm disturbed about her, Second Amendment positions, but it's like this guy said on, I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, Tom Luongo. I heard him on Fault Lines radio show with Stranahan and Nixon.
Yes.
The foreign policy is keys to the empire. You take away that type of interventionist, police the world, imperial foreign policy, bring the troops home, cut the defense budget, drastically. And what you're going to do, you're going to take away the money. You're going to take away the money from the military-industrial complex, the neocons, a lot of the other globalist types, neo-libs, the whole thing. And in that respect, everything else hopefully would fall back in line, and this country would really become great again. Because as long as we have to be the policemen of the world, and as long as we're conducting an empire instead of a republic, we're going to continue to go down, and the way you said, we'll probably go the way of the Soviet Union, because that's what defeated the Soviet Union.
The U.S. government is not policing the world. That's what they tell you to make it sound like it's a good thing. They are bombing and invading and regime changing country after country after country to bring them into the American empire. That's what they're doing. There's no policing involved at all.
Well, you're right there. I'm just saying this is the term people use. Police the world. you're right, though. It basically is an empire. That's what it is. And if you take the keys away from that empire, you bring everything else into line. That's why I think healthy. That's why they fear. Already, you can see the way they fear this woman. When I see them fearing her, that tells me that she is definitely doing something right, and that she really stands for something. You know, even if I don't agree with her and everything. Unfortunately, Trump. And I do believe this woman would be different than Trump. I believe she would stand up to the deep state. I think she knows what to look for. She's got military connections. She was in the military. I really think that she would know what she was doing. By the way, about this guy, this phony, I didn't even know until you just said it that he wasn't even in Vietnam, though I kind of suspected when I looked at his age. He should actually team up with that guy Blumenthal there in Connecticut, the senator of Connecticut. They'd have something really in common, because he also said he was a Vietnam vet, which he is not.
Well, I don't know. Is this Nathan Phillips, is he perhaps Elizabeth Warren's long-lost brother?
Oh, well, he actually does look like a Native American. Probably not. Who knows?
Yeah, but Elizabeth has the high cheekbones. Remember, she had those high cheekbones.
Too. And they definitely lie together, right?
Oh, they certainly do. They certainly do.
Maybe there is something to it. All right, Mike. I just wanted to ask you that about this guy Wall. I'll look it up. This guy. People need to wake up and understand that there is foreign influence in this country, and it's not from Russia.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, it's huge, and everybody ignores it. Everybody kisses its butt. Inside our government. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go.
Right.
Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another caller after these few words. Getting back to Nathan Phillips, this far-left Native American activist, the media should have realized he was lying about Vietnam because he claimed he served in Vietnam in 1976, and the U.S. pulled out of Vietnam in 1973. And if somebody had just done a quick little fact check, they could have saved themselves a huge embarrassment. Anyway, let's go back to the phones. Francis in Quebec, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I've been sort of puzzling a bit over this presence of the U.S. Marines in Syria, because it's not really big enough a force to actually affect any serious change. So what's it doing there? And there's a really good article that just came out today on VoltaireNet.org by Thierry Mason. And what he's saying is they're there to extricate their Daesh mercenary assets. And so then the question begs itself, what are they doing with the Daesh after they've extricated them and saved them from the Syrian army and the Russian bombing? And what they're doing is they're moving them into Afghanistan to fight against the Taliban government there that holds about 60% of the country. And as recently as the 12th of January, the U.S. assisted the Daesh, who are ostensibly the worst terrorists in the world, and we're supposed to be fighting a war against terrorism. They brought them in with helicopters to raid a prison at Baghdad, and where they freed some other Daesh detainees. So right now there's about 7,000 of Daesh fighters in Afghanistan, sponsored by NATO and the U.S. to fight the Taliban.
To fight the Taliban. Yeah, they're shipping them up there. Well, we've known all along that the U.S. has been protecting ISIS, Daesh, whatever they want to call themselves. The Syrian army has regularly complained that every time they're about to encircle some of the ISIS, that the U.S. forces would come on in and basically open a little passageway in the line and allow them to escape. And there have been videos shot of U.S. helicopters evacuating the leadership of ISIS every place they're getting ready to lose a battle. So ISIS is a tool of the U.S. government. There's no question about that.
Well, that's exactly actually what the Taliban government's saying. This Qari Muhammad Yusuf Ahmadi of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is the Taliban, and he's saying, like, every time they surround these guys and they're about to crush them, the Americans will come in with attack helicopters and hit them with rockets, or they'll bring in heavy artillery and smash them to help Daesh escape.
Yes. Yeah, that's been going on all along.
Right? This is Bolton's foreign policy, right? This is what he's there to do. Because they're also in the Balkans too, the Muslims in the Balkans, and they're also instrumental in creating the Chechen uprising in Russia. Like, it's a part of a whole spectrum of stuff that they're doing with Muslims.
Well, it's not just Muslims. I mean, since the end of World War II, the U.S. government has tried to covertly regime change different countries. Some of them supposedly are allies. They tried to do it to France, something like, more than 50 times. And it's not made us any friends around the world.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I wanted to chime in on Tulsi Gabbard and what that gentleman just was talking about. What can we do with 2,000 troops in Syria? Well, that's 2,000 troops that we're admitting to. That would be a base area that would have electronic warfare assets, be monitoring the S-300s and all the air defense stuff. That would have offensive jammers, electronic surveillance stuff on everything that's going on for intelligence, and would coordinate the special operators who are out in the field that we're not telling everybody about. But and you can do that with a 2,000 person base, and it's inviolable. Nobody's going to bomb them, and they're just there. And of course, we're violating. It's like a presence. We're violating the sovereignty of setting the precedent of violating Syria's sovereignty. But the other thing was Tulsi Gabbard that Mark was talking about, and I agree. I'm going to back Tulsi Gabbard too. But believe me, the reason why the anti-empire thing doesn't really come into play. Here's what comes into play. She could talk about Afghanistan and getting out of there, and Korea and Africa, but when she talks about Syria and Iran, then you get the Jewish lobby in there.
Yes.
Then they're in your face. And it's not the empire per se. They're all for the empire when it serves Israel. They don't care about Afghanistan, except to subvert Iran. And they don't care about Korea at all.
Well, they care about Afghanistan for that oil pipeline right of way and his, huge supply of opium.
Yeah, and it's a whole side of Iran that we can destabilize them from that we couldn't do if we weren't there. So for that, they care about that, but it's only because of Iran. They could care less about Afghanistan. They could care less about Korea or anywhere else, pretty much. But the Middle East, Syria, Iran, that they run our foreign policy. It's not, and here we go. Just as you're saying, they're interfering in our electoral process again, as they constantly, always do. But that the reason why she's such a threat is because of they run our Middle Eastern policy, which then in turn, since we have so many troops deployed there, it dovetails and runs almost everything else in our foreign policy. Like, a side effect of the Syria thing is we're at odds with the Russians even more, right?
Yes.
So they don't care about the Russians, so it affects everything. They run for all intents and purposes, they run our foreign policy.
Well, they run much of it, certainly with regards to the Middle East. I don't think the Israelis are pushing for us to be mucking about in Venezuela. That's all being driven by oil money. But again, the U.S. is concerned about Afghanistan because of that oil pipeline right of way, which was the original reason for that war anyway. I mean, they blamed Afghanistan for 9/11, but the real agenda was that oil pipeline. And of course, the huge supply of opium. And I have to wonder about the parents of our young people who were killed and crippled in Afghanistan, what they must think when they find out that their children were killed and crippled in service to the drug lords.
Oh yeah, or for any of our wars, the killed and crippled. It's all specious, ridiculous, false stuff. But I want to go back and I'll amend it. The Israelis, Jewish lobby controls our foreign policy everywhere they want to.
Yes.
And if they had a commercial interest in Venezuela, then believe me, they'd get us to do whatever they wanted in Venezuela. This is, like, for instance, what's his name? Noriega. His top security advisor was an Israeli. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
well, he didn't do a very good job, did he?
No, not at all. But I mean, they're everywhere, right? I mean, remember the Israeli Mossad operatives in 2001, about 2 weeks after 9/11, that were poised to blow up the Mexican Congress building?
I remember that one.
Yeah, it was a Mossad colonel. Grenades and automatic weapons totally disappeared from the media. But obviously,
yes,
they have a lot of influence in Mexico. So wherever they want us to intervene, we intervene. We're like their frickin' sock puppet.
Unfortunately, I'm afraid that you're right. And I would like the American people to sort of wake up to that reality. But again, the corporate media is out there. Anytime you say anything critical about Israel, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you hate the Jewish people. But apparently there is enough backlash building where Israel is now lobbying for laws to criminalize criticism of Israel. And they wouldn't do that if they felt secure that their propaganda was working.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 26 states, 13 more pending, have civil penalties. And by the way, that means that if you're found to be critical of Israel in any of the 26 states that already has that, you cannot hold a government contract at the city, county, or state or federal level. Well, since that's the only really functioning part of the largest part of our economy, then that means a lot. You can't even hold a janitorial contract in the city of LA or be a custodian if you criticize Israel. But in South Carolina, as we know, it's criminal. And by the way, all those penalties are pending and 13 more, and they're trying to make that national with that new Senate Bill 1.
Yes.
So it's ridiculous, Mike. And again, the media, Tulsi Gabbard, they're coming out and they're saying that who was saying that Ocasio-Cortez, that the Trump administration is anti-Semitic. They're complete toadies to Israel. But the point is, you can't be too pro-Israel. And no matter what, as long as people are hurling those accusations, even as ridiculous as they are, with Trump, who's a complete owned asset, really.
Yes.
Not of Russia, but of Israel. But even he has to jump to that. He gives them Jerusalem. He gives them all the weapons they want. $38 billion. All these laws that he will sign into effect. All these criminal laws, he'll sign them. But that's not enough. He still gets that leveled at them, leveled at him. And so it's a moving bar. You just can't do enough.
Oh, it is. I mean, that's kind of a part of the culture there. Yes, you were nice to me last week. What have you done for me today? And
what more can you? You can do more than that too. By the way, what's wrong with you? You can do more than that. It's never enough.
No, it never is. And when people talk about the Orthodox story of the Holocaust, and they say, why isn't Israel grateful to all the nations that basically stopped Germany from completing whatever the final plan was supposed to be? And Israel's response is, well, you didn't do it soon enough.
Right. I mean, nothing is ever enough. And now they want everybody to pay for the Holocaust they inflicted on the Palestinians to the tune of, what, $250 million or something?
Oh, it's more than that. It's in the billions.
$250 billion. Yeah. To pay for their Nakba ethnic cleansing of the poor Palestinians. Anybody gets in their way, they'll do the same thing as the Nazis, and we have to pay for it. But it's just, God. And then the media, we're talking about the media. You can't leave them out of there.
Nope.
The the media is four square. Anytime that Trump bombs Syria, no matter how bad they're talking, even what's his name, Acosta, and all these guys will come out and say, "Oh, that's great. How presidential he looks." As long as he's killing Israel's enemies. As soon as he talks about all these pretend liberals, will say, "Oh my God, you're talking about getting out of Syria? What about Israel?" You know, they march to their owners and their masters' wishes.
Yep, I'm afraid you're right, and it's getting pretty obvious, and that may be a good thing. Like I said, Israel would not be pushing all these states and the federal government to criminalize criticism of Israel if they thought their propaganda lock on the American people was still intact. I smell fear behind this. I smell desperation. For one thing, none of these laws will ever pass a Supreme Court challenge because it is an attack on our First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And trying to say that criticism of Israel represents hatred of the Jewish people makes as much sense as saying that the only reason people complained about the Nazis is they hate Germans. We're not talking about the ethnic group or skin color or religion. We're talking about the behavior of governments here. And no government should be above reproach.
Well, Mike, and the other thing is that those laws intimidate everybody until then, and they'll do their best to make sure that it never gets to the Supreme Court. And since so the largest block of co-religionists within the Supreme Court are Jews. That's more than there are Protestants, more than there are Catholics. There are Jews as one single block. It may never get to the Supreme Court, and we'll just have to live with it.
Well, the Supreme Court couldn't refuse to hear the case, but before it gets to the Supreme Court, somebody will have to have a lawsuit somewhere. Somebody gets taken to court over one of these laws, and they're going to say, my defense is the First Amendment. The judge will say, no, the First Amendment doesn't apply here, and then there'll be an appeal, and it will go up the chain. And at some point, I presume there's going to be some federal judge who is going to agree this kind of a law is an affront to the First Amendment. There are no exceptions to the First Amendment. It is an absolute. And unfortunately, if they carve out an Israeli exception, then the next thing, there'll be a vaccine exception, and there'll be a GMO exception. They'll start chipping away at the First Amendment and say, well, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. And that means it's no longer freedom of speech, it's permitted speech.
I would submit that we're there already, and just because some federal district court rules on it doesn't mean that for one thing, they're subornable to the federal judges, but if it ever gets to the Supreme Court, they've got a built-in block there as well. We have to be careful about, one more will be a majority for them on the Supreme Court. So,
well, we'll see what Trump is going to do if Ginsburg does step down, and if Steve Bannon is right and Clarence Thomas retires. Again, we'll see what Trump does there. But you're right. Israel has completely subverted our entire government. I remember growing up in elementary school in the days of the commie bashing, and social studies class was always about beware of communist subversion. The communists are trying to infiltrate our government. This was back when Joe McCarthy was doing his thing here. And our country was being infiltrated and subverted. We were just all looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single war we've been in since, virtually in my lifetime, except for Vietnam, which, has been basically at Israel's request. So,
okay, well, listen, we got to take another commercial break. Peter, thank you very much for the phone call. We've got more. We've got another caller waiting online, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Mark in Montana. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. I want to kind of bring up Afghanistan because I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on there, and I can't get anybody to explain it to me. I disagree with you on the oil, and I disagree with you on the opium because legal opium can be obtained from Turkey, and that's where most of the pharmaceutical companies buy it. And I'm sure a lot of
yeah, but they get it cheaper from Afghanistan.
Possibly, I don't know, but it's the point is kind of moot because they can take a few chemicals and mix it up in a few beakers, and they've got synthetic opium, which
well,
is
Mark, common sense. Yeah. There's a lot of opium poppies growing all over Afghanistan. I got pictures of them being guarded by coalition troops. Somebody's buying that opium.
Yeah, that's weird too. And the oil, this is why I don't buy the oil. I'm in the oil industry, and we have flooded the market with so much oil right now that these companies out here in West Texas are starting to lay people off. I mean, it's that bad. And $50 a barrel oil is not sustainable for these companies to continue exploration.
Well, I understand that, but what we're talking about in Afghanistan is not the oil, but the oil pipeline right of way. And there was this consortium of oil companies led by UNOCAL that wanted to build that pipeline across Afghanistan, and they went to negotiate with the Taliban. And the Taliban basically said, yes, but there's a fee that you pay for the pipeline right of way. And they quoted a price that's consistent with pipeline right of way in other countries. Well, the oil companies didn't want to pay that. So they literally went before the Congress and said, we need a more sympathetic Western-friendly government in Afghanistan so that we can get the pipeline at a much lower cost. And that was the root, that was the beginning of the push for a war in Afghanistan. Why do you think, remember Hamid Karzai was the installed president of Afghanistan? He had been a representative of UNOCAL at those hearings at Congress where they called for the regime change. Those pipelines are of significant geopolitical, strategic importance. And where they go and who's got them and whose land they travel over are major, major factors.
Yeah, but I would not even consider putting a pipeline in an unstable country because it didn't matter what you would do to it, it's going to get destroyed.
Well, it wasn't unstable until the U.S. went into it. I mean, after the Soviet Union left, Afghanistan was seen as stable.
But, they've never really, they don't take well to foreigners over there. The last country, or the last group of people that invaded and took over and controlled was Alexander the Great and his armies of Greece, Macedonia. The Russians couldn't do it. The Brits were there they were there twice for quite a while. And they were pretty repressive, but not near as repressive as the Russians. The Russians would come into whole villages, and if they found one .303 British rifle cartridge, they'd wipe out the whole village because the Afghanis were using that .303 round against the Russians pretty effectively. And the Russians got their what's handed to them, and they left with their tail between their legs. They could not
that was because of U.S.
They can hold it.
That was because of U.S. covert intervention, Charlie Wilson's war. And a lot of what we're told the Russians did in Afghanistan may have been propaganda to build U.S. popular support for our involvement there, for those who knew that it was actually going on. Anyway, listen, we got to take a break for station identification. Thanks an awful lot, Mark. We'll be back with yet another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Just got an email responding to Mark saying, ask Pat Tillman how much it costs to protect Russell Trust opium. And for those of you who don't get that reference, the Russell Trust is the formal name for the Skull and Bones Fraternity, the official legal name of the Skull and Bones Fraternity at Yale University. And yes, the Russell Trust was established with opium money. Now, granted, back then it was a legal crop, although considered immoral and unfashionable. But yeah, there's a lot of opium tied up in the history of Skull and Bones. Let's go back to the phones here. James in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. As far as why we're in Afghanistan, I'm looking at a NBC News article summary from 2014. The aerial surveys determined that Afghanistan may hold 60 million tons of copper, 2.2 billion tons of iron ore, 1.4 million tons of rare earth elements such as lanthanum, cerium, and neodymium, and aluminum, gold, silver, zinc, mercury, and lithium. I'd say the rare earth elements are the big thing because of the electronics they use them in. In addition, of course, the opium is used for worldwide heroin production, which now that it's for all ages in the West, I imagine it's quite a bit, quite probably I don't know, from tens to hundreds of billions.
Yes, it's
So
kind of hard to know because
right.
it's kept out of sight. But we know that elements within our government are very much involved in the drug trade. The drug trade corrupts governments, the politics of contraband, just like alcohol did during Prohibition. The same mechanism is at work. And, you know, we're looking down at Mexico. We're seeing how bad it can get. Apparently, some police down there were gunned down as revenge for seizing something like 20 kilograms of meth. So, yeah, it's really out of control.
You can bet the meth was made with Chinese chemicals, too. I've heard they have hydrogenators that can make 100 pounds at a time. Probably now they're even bigger ones. But I think I saw this link on your page. Abby Martin's video on Trump's pullout of Syria. I have to say I was profoundly disappointed in Mr. Trump. Apparently, it's kind of like a furniture store will raise the price on an item and then, you know, artificially raise the price to much more than it's worth and then put it on sale
for what the original asking price was. Yeah. We saw that in the run up to the holiday shopping season. We're starting in November. The prices were being raised a little bit, raised a little bit, raised a little bit. Then they got to Black Friday and they said, oh, everything's on sale. It's slashed 1/3. And again, it was a psyop to basically flog people into the shopping malls and spend a lot of money, which didn't work out as well as the retailers had hoped.
Well, the parallel I'm drawing is that Trump vastly increased the number of troops, you know, and so a pullout isn't really, he's not really pulling out that many. Plus, he's not pulling out the contractors, and nobody said anything about stopping the bombings. Furthermore, she had a couple clips of him that I hadn't seen before, talking about going after the terrorist families, and what else was it? Well, you know, the original Iraq War was originally termed Operation Iraqi Liberation or Oil, but this clip showed Trump talking about taking the oil as if it's a matter of course, as if it's a justifiable reason for going to war. You know? So he's kind of like Bush, except he's honest about it. So at least, you know, not too often, but in this one clip he was. I think he actually referred to the term spoils of war.
Well, that is very, very sad to see, and I didn't watch the video all the way through because I was busy putting together my talking points, but definitely I need to go back and take a look at that and watch it all the way through.
Yeah. I may be wrong about that, but I'm fairly certain. I've been reading a great deal and watching a great deal of things today, so. But, yeah, Afghanistan certainly makes sense when you consider the rare earth minerals and minerals.
Yeah, because we're running out of those things. There's already an industry group out there saying that all of our fancy toys that we have here, the smartphones, the tablets, all the rest of it, they could actually go away or be replaced by something a lot bulkier because the rare earth minerals used to make them are now in short supply. And if Afghanistan has a treasure trove of those, then yeah, that would justify, well, it doesn't justify it, but it certainly would be a reason for the U.S. government to go on in there.
And other than that, China controls like 90-some% of the rest of the world's rare earth mineral deposits. So.
Yeah, and the U.S. would like to break that monopoly.
Yeah, well, that's all I had for you. Keep up the good work.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network and getting on back to the news. You are not going to believe this next story. Joe Biden is out there blaming the Democrat losses in Florida and Georgia's 2018 gubernatorial races on Republican-driven electoral fraud. And he says the fraud consists of voter ID laws that keep people from being able to vote. That's it. He's out there saying that the Republicans stole Florida and Georgia governorships with voter ID laws. Well, Joe, the only people voter ID laws keep from voting are those who are not supposed to vote, and non-citizens are not supposed to vote. And what Joe has just said confirms what we know. The Democrats are desperate for the illegal immigrants to be able to vote, because the illegal immigrants will be going into 2020. Meanwhile, down in Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam says that he is introducing a legislative package that would repeal voter identification requirements in his state and implement a no-excuse absentee voting. I mean, the Democrats are just opening up the election system to election fraud. And I hope Donald Trump is paying attention to this and getting wind of it. I hope somebody, who's got his ear is out there saying, you should pay attention to this here. Trump had an opportunity to clean up our election system. He didn't, and he is going to pay a hideous price for it come 2020. I don't think he's got a chance in 2020. I know he's going to be the Republican nominee. The RNC's already thrown their support and endorsement behind him. But the Democrats are going to sweep Congress and the White House, and they're going to do it with massive election fraud and illegal immigrant voting. And they're going to basically take over the country and reimpose their extreme leftist liberal agenda, where we won't know which restrooms we're supposed to be using. Meanwhile, over at the House of Representatives, incoming House Transportation Chairman Peter DeFazio is planning to impose a new traffic tax. Now, they're claiming it's going to replace the federal gas tax, and it's going to charge motorists based on a per-mile fee. So far, so good. But in order to combat traffic congestion, okay, the GPS systems that are tracking where you're going and how much miles you're driving basically tax you at a higher rate when you experience traffic. Now, that's ridiculous. Drivers don't deliberately cause traffic jams. And if you want to fight congestion, how about we take some of that money that is being spent bombing other people's countries or building roads in Israel and build wider roads here in the United States? It's just another cash grab. And no, I don't believe that they'll repeal the federal gas tax. It'll just be a new tax on you, the American people, because we are in a wartime economy, and the first government that runs out of money loses. That's what we saw in Germany in World War II. They simply ran out of money. They couldn't get any more out of their population. The German people were just driven down into absolute abject poverty trying to pay for all of this. And when Germany ran out of money, that's when they started losing the war. Now, we've been talking about the U.S. dollar and its decline as a global currency in global transactions. It turns out the same thing is happening to the euro. So people are turning away from these Western currencies that are based on wishful thinking, which is really what it is here. Over at Sears, as you know, they're heading into their bankruptcy, and there was a serious concern that one of their many indiscretions over the years is that they had allowed their pension fund to be looted to try and keep their business going. So it is now empty, and so now we're hearing from the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is part of the federal government, that the feds are going to step on in to bail out the vast majority of 90,000 Sears pensions, rather. Guess who gets to pay for that? Oxfam is warning that the gap between the rich and poor is growing, which is fueling global anger. And yes, it is. It really is. 26 ultra-wealthy billionaires now have as much wealth as the poorest bottom of the human population, 3.8 billion people. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out there, and she's made headlines again by saying that a society that allows for there to be so many billionaires is somehow immoral. And I'm not sure that morality comes into it, but she is correct that something is clearly out of whack when you have a system that seems to shove all of the wealth into the top few pockets. And that, of course, is called fascism. Getting back on down to Venezuela, Venezuela has succeeded in recovering some of the gold they swapped with Deutsche Bank as collateral for a loan. But right now that gold is parked in the Bank of England, and the Bank of England is dragging their feet on sending it back to Venezuela with the excuse that, oh, it might be used for money laundering, or it could be simply taken up by corrupt Venezuelan government officials. Now, Venezuela wants the gold under their own control, and it is their right. It's their gold after all. But they want it under their own control because they're expecting the U.S. government to hit them with more sanctions, and they want to have the gold with which to conduct business around the world. Okay, Governor of the Central Bank of Iran, Abdul Nasser Hamadi, has announced that Japan has resumed oil imports from Iran. Now, Japan had temporarily suspended all shipments of crude ahead of last November 5th's supposed launch of U.S. sanctions against Tehran, but now they're starting to resume the oil imports. They need it. Japan is one of Iran's largest oil importers. It's also the United States' staunchest ally in Asia, and of course that's creating a certain degree of tension. Meanwhile, China is seeking a $3 billion oil deal with Iran despite the U.S. sanctions. So the sanctions really aren't working. And again, as long as these countries are working in their own native currencies, as long as they're not going through SWIFT or the American banks, the sanctions are unenforceable. Over in Russia, they have cut their foreign debt to a decade low, while boosting their national reserves, much of which is in gold. So basically, Russia carved their foreign debt by 12.4% from the same time last year. Now that shows you what a well-managed country with a well-managed economy and a government-managed central bank is able to do. So, talking about immigration, okay, we're getting a breaking news story here. Apparently, Israeli warplanes have returned to the border, so it's definitely on. It is definitely on, and oh my goodness, we're going to be in a global shooting war by the end of the year. All right, let me get this posted because people need to see this. And I'll be right with you. Okay, Israel. Yeah, this is Netanyahu's way of distracting from his coming indictment. All righty, getting on back to immigration. Border Patrol agents are currently working without pay because of the shutdown. They're still trying to do the job, though. And we're now basically at 1 month there. There was an interesting video that surfaced over a section of the U.S. border along Arizona. Now, this section of border does not have any fence, does not have any wall. And the video basically shows this bus simply pulling up on a highway close to the border, and some 84 migrants exited the bus and just walked into the U.S. unhindered. And I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are celebrating 84 more Democratic voters. Yee-haw! Here's a story which does not seem to be getting a lot of coverage in the corporate media. Apparently, an illegal immigrant has been arrested over in Carson City for 4 homicides in the U.S. And apparently this guy, Ernesto Martinez Guzman, he's somewhere about like 20 years old. They're not really sure. He's not talking. But he's being held for suspicion of burglary, possession of stolen property, immigration law violations, of course, And the police are saying they think he's linked to 4 different homicides as well. Now, here's an interesting little story over again back in Arizona. Senator Gail Griffin, Republican, has introduced a new bill to tax internet porn. And the bill would basically force computer and phone retailers to install porn blocking software, which could only be removed for a fee of at least $20. The weirdest part is the money would be used to help build President Donald Trump's infamous wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, among other things. Well, let's see. Population of Arizona times $20. It's going to fall far short of the billions that are actually needed. But apparently the bill, if it passes, you would have to prove that you're 18 years old and pay at least $20. But the retailers would be allowed to charge more on top of that, which they probably will, because they have to cover the costs of installing the porn filter to begin with. The other day we were talking about how Germany was now offering migrants cash to go back home. And now the Czech Republic is following suits. They're going to pay non-EU migrants to go home. And they're saying this is going to cost taxpayers far less than if the migrant groups were allowed to remain in the country. So apparently they're going to offer the foreign nationals up to 4,000 euros financial assistance, which would cover their transportation costs, setting up accommodations for the homeland, and the purchase of livestock. So Europe really has had. French authorities have built a 10-foot wall at a Total station in Calais. Total's a gas company. And apparently the problem is they're trying to stop the illegals getting to Britain. And the way the illegals are doing it is this petrol station, this gasoline station in Calais is the last stop where the trucks will basically top off their tank before they head over to Great Britain. And the migrants will basically sneak into the trucks at that point. So now France has built this huge wall surrounding the station to prevent that from happening. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go to the phones now to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Yeah, Michael, I called you a couple weeks ago, and I remember I had told you about Pelosi and Schumer should be arrested for the invasion of our country with illegal invasion. I'm sure you saw or aware what happened yesterday or 2 days ago in Reno, Nevada, where you had 4 Americans were murdered by an illegal, 19 years old. He shot them all to death in their homes. And I'm wondering, Michael, are these Democrats can be held responsible for these murders? And I'm really freaking out, Michael, right now, hearing that over 30-some thousand Americans have been murdered by illegal aliens in the last 8 years. Is that a true statistic?
You're talking about the Yale study. Yeah, that's what Yale University was saying.
Yeah, Yale University, that's correct. And what about this $72,000 or $74,000 illegal? It costs American taxpayers a year for each one of these people?
Yep, that's about right.
The American public doesn't make that working, Michael.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Now that figure's got me perplexed.
It's a huge, huge cost. I mean, we had that story yesterday where one of the reasons why the Los Angeles Unified School District is so short of funds, which is what's led to the current strike, is they're having to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars educating illegal immigrant adults and children.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable, Michael. I don't know if Trump's going to get the wall funded. But what I want to know is, I was wondering if Schumer and this guy Adam Schiff, how would they like 5 million Muslims to sneak into Israel? And I don't know if you're aware of what's going on with France, but right now the English are building a wall to keep, or the French are building a wall to keep the illegals from going into England.
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Story?
We just talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Michael, I can tell you from living here where I live, these people, it's not to come here to compliment, it's to come here to take over your situation and your job and your lunch and every other thing. This is an invasion, and it's got to be called for what it is, an invasion. And it's not a thing about the poor little kids are coming here. What are these kids coming here for? Keep them in their own country and make them better in their own country.
That's a very, very good point. I mean, the reason the United States, at least before the war economy, the reason this was a really good country is because generation after generation after generation of Americans made it that way through hard work and intention and just a desire to have a better life. And in these other countries where things are not so good, it's because their populations generally weren't that motivated. And instead of staying in their own countries and getting the motivation to make their countries better, all of a sudden the gates are open. Oh, we'll just go into Europe. We'll just go into the United States and we'll be able to live in this wonderful, built-up, beautiful country, and all will be well. And unfortunately, as they flock into Europe and the United States, they're basically dragging the Europe and the United States back down to the same level of conditions that were in their home country.
Absolutely, Michael. Well, great point. I mean, that's exactly what I've been thinking all this time. They're going to turn this place into a place they ran away from. But, Michael, let me ask you a question. The 4 people that were murdered by this illegal, do their families have a right to sue the federal government for hundreds of millions of dollars for each victim that's been murdered by an illegal alien that's not supposed to be here? I mean, what else they brought a lawsuit for hundreds of millions of dollars against Pelosi and these Democrats for allowing the illegal invasion of our country? Would that be possible?
I'm not sure sovereign immunity applies to individual members of Congress. I know it does to the government as a whole, and supposedly, in theory, to the president, although obviously there's a lot of people who think that should not be the case. Yeah, unfortunately, the government has rendered itself pretty much impregnable to any concern that we, the people, might have about what they're doing.
Michael, one more thing. I know you got other callers. Michael, I found out that Obama, Pelosi, all these rich Democrats and Republicans have walls around their houses.
Yes.
They don't want to have a wall around our border, but they're all filthy rich. Pelosi's worth millions and millions of dollars. She's got a wall around her house in San Francisco. Obama's got a wall around the house in Washington, D.C. If I bet the neighborhood's blocked off, I don't even think he can go by his house. So what's going on here with these left? I mean, this is unbelievable, the hypocrisy of these liberals. This is mind-boggling to me.
Oh, it is. Sure. Walls are okay for us, but not for you. Guns are okay for us, but not for you. And it sort of betrays the arrogance of the liberal mind, that because they're liberals, they are automatically superior, and you conservatives, you're subordinate. It's almost like H.G. Wells in The Time Machine, the Eloi and the Morlock. Exactly. White heterosexual males are rapidly becoming the Eloi, while the fanatical liberals are becoming the Morlocks. And if you haven't read the actual book, you ought to. It's much better than the movies they've made out of it.
Well, Michael, I just got to say one more thing. You know what the difference between a communist and a capitalist is?
Don't know.
Want to tell you? A communist eats his dog. A capitalist walks his dog. That's all I got to say.
Okay, not sure I find that funny. Anyway, we got to take another commercial break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And there's a story just now breaking where apparently Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell have come up with something of a deal to end the shutdown. And apparently on Thursday, the Senate will vote on 2 separate bills. One of the bills has the backing of President Trump, and it includes the $5.7 billion for the border wall. Now, the other bill, the alternative bill, would extend funding for shuttered agencies through February 8th, which is not that far away, but that's apparently the compromise they've come down with. And it sounds really good. It does sound good. There's this little wrinkle, though, and it sort of reminds us that all these people in Congress and the White House don't seem to have read the Constitution, because revenue measures, spending bills, must originate in the House of Representatives, then the Senate confirms, then it goes to the president for the signature here. But we have a government that basically has gone outlaw. They don't play by the rules anymore. All righty, getting on back to immigration. And the refugee crisis. Actually, we're talking about Brexit now. Britain's Secretary of State for International Trade has warned that if politicians refuse to accept the people's vote for Brexit, it could unleash a political tsunami with unknowable consequences for the stability of the realm. And he's absolutely right. The British people voted to leave the EU 2 years ago. They're still stuck in the EU, and they're watching members of Parliament and the Prime Minister trying to find some way to say, well, not yet, and maybe not ever. You know, we believe in the globalist New World Order, and you subjects should just go along with that. And so Liam Fox basically wrote in the Sunday Telegraph that failure to deliver Brexit would produce a yawning gap between Parliament and the people. And yeah, when you're supposed to have, some kind of representation in the government, and you vote for something, and the government ignores you, that's a real problem. That's when you start getting the yellow vests out. Now, as you know, Theresa May is supposed to be coming up with a Plan B following the defeat of the Chequers Plan. George Galloway was on TV basically saying that as near as he can tell, the Plan B is not going to fly anyway, and it looks like they're heading towards a no-deal Brexit. Jeremy Corbyn is out there blasting the sheer waste of all of this, that as they natter and gromish and argue with each other and go with these media campaigns, it's costing an average of £171,000 every hour. And that's the equivalent to paying the annual salaries of 50,000 secondary school teachers, 86,000 newly qualified nurses, or 49,000 police constables. It is a huge, huge amount of money. Now, Theresa May has been warned that no less than 40 of her ministers could resign if she denies them the right to vote for a plan that would block a no-deal exit from the EU later this year. Home Secretary Amber Rudd has informed May and other government officials that the possible exodus could take place unless the ministers are allowed to support an amendment in the House of Commons that extends the duration of Article 50 beyond the original March 29th deadline for Brexit. Now, this plan basically is an attempt to change the way Parliament operates, to basically change the rules. And this bill is being introduced by a bunch of the backbenchers that are out there saying, you give us this, or we'll be out here. And it looks like Her Highness the Queen may get dragged into this thing because she still outranks everybody else in that parliament, and she may be asked not to give assent to the Brexit wreckers' bills. Now, every time there's a prime minister who's elected and sworn in Great Britain, there's a ritual that they go through where the prime minister goes to the Queen and requests her permission to form a government. And it's a traditional ritual. Everybody goes through that. But basically, it's a reminder that the Queen of England is still the Queen of England. And she can basically say, no, you're not allowed to change the structure of the government. You're not allowed to change the way Parliament operates. So this thing is getting really, really ugly. Right now, we're seeing calls for a general election. The people of Great Britain are just fed up with all of this nonsense. They feel like they're being cheated. They feel like the government is just not listening to them. And I imagine they're getting very, very desperate about things. Pardon me. Now, in Sadiq Khan's London, over in Green Park, there is a memorial to the tens of thousands of Bomber Command air crews who lost their lives during the Second World War. If you remember the stories of the Memphis Belle, they had to do daylight bombing. There was no such thing as night vision back then. And of course, the Germans, when they heard the bombers coming, would simply turn off all the lights, and it made it impossible to bomb at night. So the bomber crews had to bomb during the air, where their targets were visible, but unfortunately they were also visible to the gun crews below. And they did lose a lot of aircraft and crews. And if you were assigned to one of those planes, the promise was if you survived 25 missions, you were done, you would get to go home. But they lost a lot of airplanes and a lot of people in this. So there's this memorial, and apparently somebody vandalized it, splattered it with white paint, along with a nearby statue of Sir Winston Churchill. And no arrests have been made, but they're looking at the closed-circuit TV footage of the areas. So Piers Morgan basically came on out responding to this, saying, why do you beat us with the things we are proud of? And apparently he was responding to this Dr. Kahinda Andrews, who's a professor of black studies at Birmingham City University, saying that the World War II bombers committed a war crime. No, actually they weren't. They were fighting a war. They were fighting a war, and you do drop bombs in war. Let's see. Apparently, we've been hearing this kind of build for a while, where Germany and France are starting to form a political axis to try and grab control of the EU away from Brussels. They're talking about a grand European Union army. And apparently this morning, the French President Macron and German Chancellor Merkel signed off on what's called the Aachen Treaty. This is the latest Franco-German bid to strong-arm the EU under their control. So things are getting very, very intense over there. All righty. Now, Marine Le Pen, in the lead up to the European Union elections, is appealing to the yellow vests. She thinks they could be a significant voting bloc, and they can when you look at just how many of them there are. And she's saying the battle really is between the nationalists and the globalists. And the globalists are still trying to create their new world order, but as the yellow vests are demonstrating, yeah, people don't want to be part of a global empire. They want their own country. They want their own nationality. They want their own culture. They want borders. Those people who have built beautiful countries like Germany and France and Italy, they want to keep them, and they have every right to keep them. So this is getting very, very intense. Now, a couple of videos have come on out from this last weekend. First of all, there were yellow vests present in the Right to Life March and also the Women's March. And apparently there was a yellow vest protest up in Vermont protesting a new carbon tax on gasoline. Same thing that kicked off the protests in France. And the irony of it was the carbon tax on gas is being promoted by Vermont to fight human-caused global warming. And of course, they're snowed in up there right now. It's been a very, very hard winter. So those yellow vest people were out there just in the cold, in the snow, to protest a global warming tax. Now, this is interesting. There's this Catholic priest. He's Franciscan friar, Father Daniel Horan. He's a pro-LGBT priest and professor, and apparently he's going to be speaking at the upcoming Los Angeles Religious Education Congress. Basically went on Twitter to bash the March for Life. And he was one of the people who also condemned the white Catholic high school boys as racist. Again, before all the facts were in. So Father Horan is basically saying that the Washington March for Life is repulsive and futile, denouncing the pro-life event as basically a gathering for many right-wing, anti-abortion hardliners. Well, Father, it's been a very, very, very long time since I've been anywhere near a Catholic church, but I seem to recall that the Catholics were against abortion. So I don't know what's going on. One of the other videos that surfaced from the Women's March in Washington, D.C., and this was over on Breitbart, where there's this women's marcher boasting about how many abortions she's had and screaming, "It's my body until they cut the umbilical cord," followed by a profanity. In fact, there was a lot of profanity that was in this. And she said, "Stop talking about women's reproductive rights when you've got a dick. You're a man. You don't get to comment about me having a baby." So a lot of hostility there. The divisions are being fanned. It was just like COINTELPRO. Black against white, women against men, keeping us divided so we don't unite together and really start taking a good look at what our government is doing. In fact, when we were talking to Tom yesterday, he made this interesting comment about disconnecting the population from reality, and I think he's hit it right on the head. That's a lot of what's going on. That may be a big reason behind all this gender fluidity nonsense and transgenderism, to basically just get us so confused about what's going on that we're not really looking at the real world anymore. We're all caught up on what is gender, which bathroom do I use. We need to break free from that. We need to go back to looking at the real world. Alrighty, Planned Parenthood has come on out with their latest statistics, saying that in the last year they performed 332,757 abortions. It's a new record. They generated $1.6 billion in revenue, and they only made 2,800 adoption referrals. This confirms the story that came out last week where Planned Parenthood is saying, yeah, our core business is abortion. You know, just suck them out, chop them up, sell the pieces. Getting into political correctness meets education, and education suffers. American University in Washington, D.C. is hosting an event on the 1st of February on what is called anti-racist grading, with a professor who serves as a director of a writing center who's pushing the argument that American grammar is a racist, unjust language structure. And this professor is out there saying that when somebody submits schoolwork to you, you shouldn't judge it based on the writing quality. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, can you imagine a professor who made remarks against black people? Well, they'd be gone. But apparently there is this University of Georgia instructor, Professor Iram Osai Frimpong, who was basically on video defending anti-white remarks he made on social media. And he instructed his Twitter followers to take war to the white Christian family, said whites are lazy, autistic, psychopathic, and sociopathic, and declared that fighting white people is a skill. The university is defending him. They're planning no disciplinary actions. We're heading towards Zimbabwe. Really, really are. Here's another one about just how crazy this whole Me Too political correctness thing is going. This has to do with a former Yale University student, Saifullah Khan, who was accused of rape by a woman. And the Connecticut jury took less than 4 hours to basically decide that he was not guilty, that the woman had, in fact, granted consent and then changed her mind after the fact, which you're not supposed to do. Although radical feminists back in the 1990s were actually saying that even if she said yes, if she got up the next morning and had regrets, well then yes, by golly, that was rape. Yale University, of course, had expelled the student at the accusation. They didn't wait for the trial. Now he's been found not guilty. They're still not letting him back in. So he's trying to appeal Yale University's decision. But apparently, there were like 75,000 people signed a petition to ban him from campus before the facts were even known. We have headed into a culture where accusation means condemnation, and this has got to stop. Now, for those of you who caught the lunar eclipse this last weekend, and it was spectacular, something rather amazing happened. Apparently, the moon was struck by a meteorite during the totality. It was bright enough for people on Earth to see, and it was actually captured on a digital sensor by Jose Marie Madiado, who's an astronomer at the University of Huelva in Spain. And he's been trying for 10 years to capture a meteorite hitting the moon during a lunar eclipse, and persistence pays off. He finally got it. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our show after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and we've got just enough time for a little bit of human-caused global warming. And right now, the coldest air of the year and possibly the winter, I wouldn't put too much money on that, of the entire winter 2018-2019 season has descended southward toward the East Coast, can create life-threatening situations for those who lose power and cannot heat their homes. Remember, we had a story out where New Yorkers were being told to just stay indoors because the wind chill was like minus 40 below here. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out there riding the global warming bandwagon. And again, it's like that story we had the other day about the hype is getting worse and worse. Everybody is trying to out-scare and out bovine excrement everybody else. So Alexandria is out there saying, like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. So next week it'll be somebody else saying, no, the world will end in 5 years if we don't address climate change. No, the world is going to end next Tuesday if we don't fight human-caused global warming here. One of the favorite alternative energy sources for the carbon Nazis are wind turbines. It's turning out they have become the world's new apex predators. And they're wiping out buzzards, hawks, and other carnivorous birds at the top of the food chain. And a study of wind farms in India found that predatory bird numbers dropped by 3/4 in areas around the turbines. And this has a ripple effect across the food chain, with small mammals and reptiles adjusting their behavior as their natural predators disappear from the skies. So this idea that wind farms don't affect the environment is complete, utter nonsense. They do. Okay, this is a story coming out where apparently over at naturalnews.com, they're talking about the government trying to make a move to seize the naturalnews.com domain and to try and criminalize all speech that questions vaccine propaganda. And again, like I said, if the Supreme Court were to carve out an Israel exception to the First Amendment, it will be followed by a vaccine exception. That's where we are right now. They're trying to criminalize legitimate exercises of free speech. Another story, this one from Natural News. Apparently, the measles vaccine has been linked to 127 deaths in the last 15 years. During that same period of time, only 2 people died of measles, which means you're more at risk of dying from the measles vaccine than from simply catching the measles. And by the way, despite the campaign, or maybe because of this massive get everybody vaccinated for measles campaign, measles infections are up, way, way up. So fascism fully on display there. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show up there in Vancouver. So stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and at the website, share it with everyone that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. I cannot underscore how much they need your financial assistance. right now. Ditto for whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.